Good morning again. Okay, so this is the second video of this two-part look at the exam. What we're going to do now is to look at the questions, and I'm going to go over them carefully. The first thing I'm going to say is the questions are going to look long, but when you start to look at the details of the questions, you realize that I'm asking one kind of broad question, and then the subsequent questions really get into answering the big, larger issue that is the theme of the question, right? So there are different parts. There are two questions, right? Each you have to write a page and a half. Excuse me. And the key is you need to touch on each element of the question, kind of subsections of the question. And I've set these questions up in a certain order, in the most logical order I can think of, from bigger issues to smaller ones, to establishing certain things at the ideas at the beginning that then feed in to the other questions, right? And they're all kind of related in a kind of cloud of ideas. So while it's not absolute that you follow this order, right? I think it makes the most sense to answer them in the order that they're asked, because each question really builds on the previous, and the successive question really deals with something that has already been established in the previous question, and so on. Okay, so here we go. We're back at Blackboard. And so the exam, remember again, the exam document is here. It's a Word document. And then when you're done, and you finish, and you either have a Word document or a PDF, you're going to upload it through the Turnitin function here by clicking View and Complete. Right? So we're going to pull up the exam itself. So here it is. And just a reminder, the due date is Saturday, March 20th at 11:59. So this is for my frenemies class, LEH. I'm just talking to you all now. This is a hard deadline. Anything turned in after this time is going to be considered late, except, with the one exception, if you have some issue that arises between now and this date, and you get in touch with me and say, Professor, I have an issue and I'm going to need more time. Can you give me until Sunday? Can you give me until Monday? Only then, with a legitimate excuse, will I extend the deadline for you. But if you don't get in touch with me, or if you get in touch with me at 11 p.m. on Saturday, I'm sorry, it's going to be considered late. So if you have an issue, it's your job to tell me as soon as you know about it, so that we can address that. Otherwise, it's going to be marked late, and which means your grade is going to be reduced by some amount, depending on how late the exam is. Right? Okay, so let's go forward to the questions. So here are the questions. There's one set of questions from Sapiens, and there's another set of questions from Aristotles Politics. Right? Okay, the first thing I should say is this. I'd like you to leave in your answer this entire question in at the beginning of your test before you answer. So what I would do is you use this document as a template to answer the questions, and in the final version that you submit, that you leave this entire question in at the beginning and then answer below it in sentence paragraph form. The important thing is, when you answer, do not include these questions within your answer. Do not include the letters within your answer. Just leave the entire question at the beginning and then the entire answer after that, right? I will be able to figure out what you're answering, right? It should be no problem, especially if you follow this order. The second thing is that now that I've said that, as you're working on the exam, what you can do is just come in here and, what is the cognitive revolution? I can come in here and I can give my answer, right? And I can use this kind of like as an outline for my essay, right? And whenever you write something, especially once it gets a certain length and you need to keep all the ideas organized, you make an outline. So this, what I've given you here, really serves as a kind of an outline. The important thing is when you're done, I do not want your answer in outline form. If you leave it in outline form, you will have points taken off for not following the formatting. Big thing. The reason I'm asking you to leave the questions as you work is so that you can always refer back to them. What happens when we write is we get our ideas, they come out, they go in this way and that, and they veer sometimes from exactly what's being asked. Or as we think about it more, we understand more clearly what is being asked and maybe what the precise answer is. So as you read, and particularly as you write and as you proofread, what I'd like you to do is to come back to the questions and say to myself, you just say to yourself, have I answered this question as directly and clearly as possible? Is everything that I said connected with this question? Have I said everything that I can say, that I'm able to say about this question? So having these questions there for you as you proofread becomes really important. Okay, so let's get into the questions themselves. And I'm just going to read this and then give a little bit of commentary. In Sapiens, the author argues that at the center of human relationships and human community is language and the ideas that go with it. Language and ideas are part of the realm of human culture made possible by what is called the cognitive revolution. Okay, so I am just giving you some setup there. There is no question, but I'm raising some of the broad issues that pertain to Sapiens' discussion of human relationships and human community. Okay, so the first part. What is the cognitive revolution and how did it give rise to human language and symbolic thinking? Right? Basically asking, what is the cognitive revolution? And in a sense, how did it make us who we are? B, what distinguishes human language and our ability to think symbolically from other animals? Right? So the text provides examples that distinguish how and what human beings are able to communicate from what animals are able to communicate. And while they communicate and while they're intelligent, there's a fundamental difference in their mode of communication and the meaning that it's able to bear. If you look back to the videos I've provided, if you look back to the text, I've given you some key information about that. C, what are the two central functions of language as described by the authors of Sapiens? So all language is the function of it is communication, but the author breaks down two subsets of two different types of information communicated through language, and they become the two central functions. It's discussed in the text, it's in the PowerPoint, it's in the video. Then D is really an extension of C. Explain how each of these two functions help to create two different types of communities. Explain the two different types of communities they're able to create. It's kind of saying it another way here. So there are two functions of language, and they are capable of creating two different types of communities, and they're noticeably different. And the text gives you examples of both. Lastly, what does the author mean by an imagined order, and how does this concept relate to the function of language? Right? So an imagined order is this thing that is the product of our ability to speak in human language with all its attributes and to think symbolically. Provide an example from the text to illustrate what an imagined order is. Explain what it is and why it's an example of an imagined order. So the text gives numerous examples. He spends more time with some than others, so that's something you might want to consider. But he gives examples of what an imagined order is. A certain order that comes into existence as a result of language and its specific functions. And I don't want to say anything else tonight, otherwise I'll be giving some of the answer away. Okay. The second question, or second set of questions, deals with Aristotle's Politics. So here I just give you a little introduction. Aristotle's Politics is a book dedicated to explaining political communities. So that's why we're talking about Aristotle, because political communities are a very special type of set of human relationships, set of human intimacy, set of human friendship. Aristotle called it civic friendship. Political communities are a product of human nature because Aristotle claims that mankind is a political animal, right? So our human nature, our very nature is political, which is why, for example, we live in political communities. And partly what you're going to have to answer here is exactly what is a political community and what does it mean to be a political animal. So I've broken the questions down into three parts, and they all build one off of the other. The first part of it deals with human nature. The second deals with human community in general. And then the third deals more specifically with this thing called a polis, or in the text that you have, it's called a city-state. But a polis and a city-state are one and the same thing, and I use both of the words to make it clear so you know exactly what I'm talking about. First, how does Aristotle understand the concept of nature generally and human nature in particular? In particular, Aristotle calls human beings political animals. What does he mean exactly? Okay, so in the videos I've provided, I talk about Aristotle's understanding of the idea or the concept of nature. It has a set of characteristics that are really important to understand because he employs this concept of nature in explaining both human nature on the individual level and human nature also on the collective level, meaning on the level of human communities, right? So what does he mean by nature, and what more specifically is meant by human nature? To give a little bit of away, our human nature, he says, we have a political nature. We are political animals. So my question is, what does he mean by that? What does he mean? B, Aristotle talks about 4 types of human communities. What is the aim or goal of each of those communities or associations as Aristotle understands it? So let me take this one at a time. So these communities come together for some purpose. They have a reason for being. In French, raison d'être. They have a purpose, a goal, an aim, an end, or Aristotle's word is a telos. It's a goal, purpose, all those synonyms, right? This purpose explains exactly why people come together in human relations to begin with. It explains why they are social animals to begin with. If there was not this underlying purpose, or purposes plural, human beings would not come together in these associations. That's his argument. So that's the central essence of this question. And then the remaining things that I ask are really just different ways of asking the same thing. As Aristotle understands it, why do human beings come together in a community in the first place? What makes human beings social animals? By social, it just means an animal that lives with other animals. It's different from political. A political animal lives in a polis, lives in a city-state. What is the glue that brings people together and keeps them together? So all these things are the same way of asking about that central thing that brings people together in human relationship, or that central set of things. Could be more than one. And then the last part deals with the city-state, which is a political community, because the city-state is a polis, right? And political comes from the word polis. The polis, or city-state, is a political community. What is special about this community that distinguishes it from the previous 3? It is not only larger, but the life in a city-state is different. How? What is special about the life of the city-state? So again, I'm asking the same question in different ways different students hear different things with each question. So one of them will hit home better than the other. The point is, there's 4 types of communities that Aristotle talks about, and the last is the polis, or the city-state. And it is, number one, bigger than the other ones. It's larger. But that's not really the thing that makes the polis what it is, simply that it's bigger. And the question is, what is distinct and special about the polis that separates it in type or kind from the other 3, apart from the fact that it's larger? D. What is the goal or telos of the life of the city-state, and how is it different from the other 3 types of communities? We've said that the goal or the purpose or the telos brings people together in the first place. The telos of the city-state or the polis is different from the other 3. Its function is different. Aristotle says the city-state or the polis comes to be for the sake of living, but it remains in existence for the sake of living well. What does he mean by that? And that second part is really connected with all of D. And it's even connected with C. So you see, these questions are really just kind of parceling out the different elements of the broader initial question that's asked. E. Aristotle speaks of notions of just and unjust, right and wrong, beneficial or harmful. He then says it is community in these, meaning just, unjust, right and wrong, beneficial and harmful, that makes a household and a city-state. What does he mean by this? What he's saying here is that a community is not just a cute group of people. It's not just a bunch of people. A community is a bunch of people that hold something in common, and it's that thing they hold in common that makes them a community. And what does this all have to do with what's being discussed in E? And then F, combining these 2 readings, explain how a political community or city-state is a form of imagined order. So absolutely, once we clarify what an imagined order is, a polis is a prime example of an imagined order. And the question that's asked, in what way, how is it that a polis is an example of an imagined order? Okay, so this is pretty much everything I want to say. And a few days, the week before the exam, we will meet, and then we can discuss any questions you may have about it. So, thank you very much, and best of luck on the exam.